Welcome to The Digital Footprint, a podcast for leaders in healthcare, public health, and education who are looking to leverage technology to solve problems and make a big impact. In each episode, we interview innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving the most challenging problems facing these industries. Join us as we dig into the colossal tasks involved in bringing a new digital product to life. Welcome to The Digital Footprint.
Hello, and welcome to The Digital Footprint. I'm Richard Sims, and this podcast is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. Today, I'm happy to be sitting down with Jacey Cadet, VP of Marketing and Community at Atlanta Ventures. And before I go further, part of our conversation before recording has been that you got married about 6 months ago, and I forgot to ask if I'm pronouncing your new last name correctly.
Got it. Yes, Cadet.
Okay, good.
Yes.
It occurred to me in that exact moment that I meant to ask before we started. But yeah, very excited to have you on, Jacey. Thanks for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. So thank you.
Awesome. So I've been looking forward to this conversation because I've known you for a long time, probably 8 years or so.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
And I think you have a ton of perspective on tech trends, the startup scene, especially here in Atlanta. And you're also an expert on all things community, which I think is super important, whether you're talking about sense of community on a team or in an industry or even in a city or neighborhood. I think it's a super cool thing to have kind of invested in your career. So I want to hit on that as a recurring theme of sorts in our conversation today, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in. All about community.
Good deal. Cool. Well, let's get into it. So to kick things off, can you just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Atlanta Ventures?
Sure. Yeah. So again, my name is Jacey Cadet. I am the VP of Marketing and Community, as you said, for Atlanta Ventures. And we are focused on many things, but really three things kind of boil to the top when it comes to Atlanta Ventures. We want to start, grow, and scale companies. So what that looks like is we have starting companies we co-found out of what's called our studio. And essentially we have billions of ideas. Billions is relative. We have tons of ideas and we're looking for folks to co-found with. They come in, we build a company together. We, of course, also invest in companies. I can kind of get into the stats as to what they are, but we, pre-seed early stage companies. And then, of course, everything that I do and most of the partners as well, we just want people who are founders or who want to be founders or thinking about founders to be supported. So whether that's blogs, resources, tools, free anything, teaching, going on campuses to different colleges, we just want to help entrepreneurs be better, whether they're part of our portfolio or not. We're trying to be a resource and build that community of, specifically in Atlanta. Obviously, we are located here, but in the Southeast and then beyond, we just want to be helpful. So that's Atlanta Ventures in a very quick nutshell.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll unpack a little bit more. And everything you're saying, of course, makes sense based on my awareness of Atlanta Ventures and everything you all put out there. And I think that's exactly right. You all have tons of resources, events, I think podcasts of your own. So although you all are in a very different space than we are with this podcast, I think we kind of share that goal of just giving people insights into starting something new, the highs, the lows, the pain points, the wins when you can get them, all that good stuff. So I love it. I think it's a great service to the scene here in Atlanta. So you all have a lot going on. Tell us more about your role specifically. I'm sure you wear a ton of hats, but what's your priority day to day?
Yeah, day to day is relative, just so we're clear. I do wear quite a bit of hats. So I'm in charge of all things AV marketing, right? Whether that comes from hosting, our emails, our social media. We have a team of interns, which is fabulous. If anyone is looking for tips, hire an intern. I'll say it there, hire an intern if you can. They're great. We've great over the years have had a good team there, but email, social, any kind of curating of content, that's all falls under kind of me. It doesn't mean I write always because we have amazing guest writers and of course content curators on our team. And then I'm in charge of most events, whether it be digital or in person, because ultimately during COVID, people were apart, so we were doing a lot of digital, but we believe in bringing people together and just sharing stories, telling stories about either entrepreneurs who have done it before or are doing it and learning, and you want to kind of like connect via events. That's all the things that I lead. And then because we have the studio, right? I said we want to build companies. I do marketing for a lot of our companies. So all of our companies in our studio.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, pre them graduating, because of course we want to get them to a point where they can graduate and bring on their own finance, bring on their own go to market, bring on their own sales, etc. Marketing is one of them. So, because I have a design background, I do all branding and marketing for them as they launch as well.
Very cool.
Hmm.
I hadn't really thought about that. You're assisting those companies in that capacity too.
Yeah,
So, okay, very cool. Yeah, I'm sure you're never short of to-dos day by day. So,
never.
going back to what you were mentioning, I do kind of understand the distinction within Atlanta Ventures, but I'm just curious to expand on it. So,
Hmm.
you all obviously might have early stage startups come to you, like pitch what they're doing, the potential they see, opportunity. And of course, if you think it's a good fit for whatever reason, you might invest in them
Hmm.
and then proceed with offering them other types of mentorship and support. I'm curious, like on that one, like what stage companies are coming in at, and then more for the studio, the way you described it, is it folks there at Atlanta Ventures have you know, ideas, like particular problems or industries that they feel excited about,
Hmm.
and they're looking for someone who could come in and kind of be, you know, the execution under their guidance, or for the studio or people coming in with their own ideas, or it's at both. So a lot of questions
Yeah,
there, but
great questions. I'll start with that one first because you said it recently. So it's both. However,
mhm,
we have found that we tend to find, right? This isn't nothing is set in stone. Never saying the always, right? So we
yep,
tend to have an idea and we have hundreds of them. David Cummings, who is the founder of Atlanta Ventures and The Village and so many other companies, has tons of ideas. We have a,
mhm,
a list, right? And so we're looking for particular type of people, right? Someone who's driven, who's maybe done it before, who's even if it's failed, right? They just know someone who's grit, who is resilient, right? We are looking for them to come in. Usually we bring them in as an entrepreneur in residence. We do customer discovery, product market fit. We do all of that work together and then we launch together, we co-found. And so that usually tends to be the idea. Like we have something in the back of our head. We meet someone, we meet John who's really good at sales. And maybe we
mhm,
have an idea that is a sales problem that could be solved. And so we marry the person and the idea together and launch. It doesn't mean that they couldn't have their idea. We're super open, right? The vision
mhm,
is that it doesn't exist. The company pre-studio doesn't exist. So whether it's our idea or theirs, if we think it's a big market, a really tough problem to solve, because we want to build billion-dollar companies.
mhm,
We're going to solve really hard problems in large markets. And so if those things align, that's great. If they already have an idea and a company started, that's where it would transition over to the other side where it's our investing. And those we're not industry specific. We obviously have things that we're looking for, as you said, like we have healthcare, we have B2C, B2B, we have marketing and sales enablement, IoT robotics, real estate, hospitality, just marketplaces, everything. We're very open. What we're
mhm.
looking for is, right? Do you have paying customers? Is it are you for as far as what you're raising, right? Usually it's pre-seed, seed, like very early. We're writing checks for 250 up to 2 million perhaps. We'll of course do follow-ons after that, but that's where that initial connection with someone who already has a company comes in.
Very cool. I'm sure that's a fun mix, and I think that the studio model is interesting. And
Super.
I think that clearly across Atlanta Ventures, you've got some heavy hitters with a lot of experience and a lot of perspective. So it makes sense that at the end of the day, they've got a lot of ideas and you can't pursue them all on your own. So, like you said, marrying
Mhm.
the right skill set and like person who's kind of at the right stage in their career to wear that founder hat
Yeah. And
Makes a lot of
and
sense.
I'll say here, what we have recently found is there's actually, and whoever's listening, right? Like you have a very specific demographic for this. Maybe they're already founders, but what we found is there's probably a lot of people out there that would be an excellent founder. Maybe they're in corporate, they've been in sales, they've been in
Mhm.
a very like leadership driven role, right? And they haven't thought about entrepreneurship. And so one thing we're really focused on is making entrepreneurship cool, right? You're obviously an entrepreneur yourself, and so, but bringing that kind of opening up the idea that they could be a founder, right? That they
Right.
could do this because they probably had experience leading teams or building products, whether that's in, say, at Microsoft, right? There's
Mhm.
tons of people who could be really good founders and they just haven't thought about it. Or if you're out of Georgia Tech and you're on the Amazon path, you're on the Facebook path, but there's other options. So that's one thing we're really excited about is we have great
Mhm.
ideas and we're just excited to marry them with
Yeah,
future founders.
that makes sense, and I think just making it more accessible and kinda giving people enough
Mhm.
support that they feel a little more confident because
Yeah.
it's scary and,
Yeah.
chances of success are still not guaranteed, but when you've got a good seasoned team offering you that support, I mean, that's a good
Yeah.
kick in the pants to take the leap.
Yeah. And again, I'll say again, from the studio perspective, you get when you join with us, you get a salary and insurance, which for some
Oh, wow.
people with families or,
Mhm.
like whether you're 21 or 31 or 41, right? That peace of mind, that instant team, and that, again, insurance and a paycheck is it's like a relief for us to be able to provide that to someone who is maybe not willing to take the leap because they need childcare or they
Mhm.
need to make a living and they can't spend all their waking hours on building a product. But if they had income coming in, providing for their family or themselves, right?
Mhm.
So that's a super, I mean, bias, of course, but wonderful benefit
Oh,
of the
yeah.
studio.
Well, of course, and I think, being honest, I don't think I really knew you all did that, or maybe I just hadn't thought about it in a while, but that is huge. I
Yeah,
mean, starting something is, of course, always risky, but, like, even just for me personally, it's like where I was when I've started business, granted, like, services businesses that relatively quickly can, start to generate cash flow and all that good
sure.
stuff, a little different than a product company, but I was younger, not married, no kids. So I
Mhm.
think kind of lessening that barrier of entry is pretty awesome. And just cutting out some of that anxiety can help people like think a little more clearly.
Exactly.
you know.
Yes.
Well, cool. So changing gears a little bit,
Mhm.
as I mentioned earlier, it seems like a lot of your focus in your career has been on building community. And that's like a lot of how I think about you when I think about you in a very good way. So, not just with Atlanta Ventures, but Community Bucket, which I'll
Mhm.
ask you about a little bit more later.
Sure.
And then I know you're running pitch practice at
Mhm.
ATV,
Mhm.
obviously, a bunch of other events associated with Atlanta Ventures. So, you went to school for design,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And it's good to know you're still like flexing those
Mhm.
muscles with some of the work with Atlanta Ventures. But I'm also just curious, like, how kind of that community element came in, right? Versus being more just purely focused on design at your computer each day, right?
Yeah.
Like, was that a conscious decision? Is it just kind of a trend and you ended up gravitating towards that type of work? Like, how did that happen?
It's a great question. Is a very specific there was a rhyme and a reason. I can share the story, hopefully I can go quickly. I was working at a design firm doing it was a marketing firm doing design, and I had gone to SCAD. This was amazing. It was so I was like, "Ooh, SCAD," right? And I'm super fortunate. I'm super blessed to have gone. And I did not like being behind a computer. This is terrible. And so I was doing some soul searching and I read a book called Good to Great, right? And
hmm
in there they talk about the hedgehog concept. And I'll preface it. It's like when the hedgehog stops, rolls around, goes at a ball, it will always survive, right? And so it's these
hmm
three things: stop, rolling a ball, and go around. And those three things equated to when you find the thing that you could be the best at, could make
hmm
money at, and could find joy at, those 3 things combined, you can survive. And so I was looking at this, I had started doing Community Bucket, I was so enthralled and it was bringing me a lot of joy. And as I started thinking through, I was like, I need to do community, whatever it is. And this job had popped up. I transitioned. I was a community manager for a season at a co-working space. And it was just, I was like, this is it. This is what I have to do. I can get paid to do
Hmm.
community, to build it, to invest in it, to talk about it, to sing about it. And so I obviously get super impassioned about it because I realized I was like, yeah, I could be good at it. I'm pretty decent at it. I really enjoy it. Brings me a lot of joy, and I could get
Hmm.
paid. So, very intentionally made the switch to focus on all things community from there on. Now, it hasn't always been in my title, but yes, it was intentional.
Very cool. And I think that's when I met you, I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah, about
when you
then.
were acting as community manager. And you obviously made an impression on me because we've stayed in touch since
Yeah.
then. So I think you were very good at it. So it works. And yeah, I think like just knowing you and your personality as much as being purely a designer is incredibly valuable and cool. It's like it's hard for me to see you kind of sitting so laser focused just on technical implementation all day. Like you're obviously a people person, so you need to
Yes.
use that other part of your brain. I like that.
Yeah.
So one another thing I wanted to ask you about, you of course have invested a ton in just generally the Atlanta tech and startup scene. And it's like I feel like I have in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, and you've
Yeah.
probably invested like 20x that. So this might be like kind of a tired topic, but when it comes to community, it's obviously been impactful. So it's like COVID, the
Mhm.
last few years, we even touched on this before we started recording. It's like, how do you think it's affected the tech and startup community in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Just curious, like what you think the lay of the land is these days and how things have shifted.
Yeah, great question. I think it's different now than when we were in shutdown, right? In it, it's obviously things are different now, but in it, I felt like thankfully there was a good strong community that could support each other, right? One thing that we really wanted to do was still be a presence. I'm not saying we were the only ones because there were so many people that were a part of it, but hosting events, continuing to bring people together
Hmm.
virtually, whether it was in person or not, right? And as we continued to do that, that's been something that I think has been true of a lot of different people in this space. Just because people need people. That's a reality, right? Whether you were apart or together, we notice that. And that is still true today. And so when we talk about post COVID, post not being able to be together and now being able to be together again and maybe a little bit different way, I do think there's certain trends that are still happening. One thing that I've seen, if you're familiar, I don't know if you've heard, but ATL Unlocked is this amazing initiative that the Metro Atlanta Chamber, ATV, Rise, Tech Alpharetta, there's 5 different partners that have been involved, and that has been an opportunity for the tech scene specifically to go to all these incubators, spaces, hubs, whatever their kind of space is called, and
Hmm.
just bring people together, right? So there's been
Hmm.
opening awareness of that, et cetera. So there's a lot of overlap that I've seen in the past. The ATL Unlocked initiative started, it's been about 2 months now that there's been this, like, touring spaces, so that has been
Cool.
great and opened up community that wouldn't have seen each other, right? And that
Hmm.
I don't necessarily mean it rose out of COVID. However, it was, like, very apparent that there was disconnect, and I think that's changing, which is awesome. And then, of
Hmm.
course, from the work perspective, right? So COVID made it easy to work from home. That's a reality, right? For most companies, most especially in tech, right? I'm not thinking essential workers, which were so thankful to have the people that were out there working, but for the tech perspective, tech-enabled softwares and companies, they
Hmm.
were able to work from home, and what we've seen is remote first is definitely a trend. There will be that, and still, there are people that wanna be together. You guys have been back in the office for a long time. I know you were home for a bit. I think we talked during homeness, but that won't change. I think people wanna come together. We're actually building a product that's focused on bringing people together called Zinnia. It's, like, focused on the offsite because that is a reality, right? You're gonna be spending there's probably gonna be an office budget, and there's probably gonna be a invest in your teammates budget because you saw what happened during COVID and what you needed, right? What this new shift and what could work. And again, I think a
Hmm.
lot of people are back in a very different schedule, different way because it can happen. We just want community. So it's more of a blessing that we can invest in community as opposed to here's another voluntold event or here's another
Hmm.
lunch hour. It's like, hey, we're doing a lunch hour once a month or a happy hour or a lunch once a month, and this is going to be epic because it's bringing us all together.
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
long-winded answer, but
No, I mean, I'm right there with you. And you're right. It's like we are, like many companies, kind of in that hybrid mindset now. Like, I don't think for us, at least, there's any going back, nor do we want to. And the team
mhm,
has thrived.
right.
But so, otherwise I would be more like, well, maybe we need,
Mhm,
but again, to your point, like most tech folks can adapt pretty quickly in that scenario. But
mhm,
exactly, I do think for us, it's driven a little more focus on like, okay, so what like outings do we want to do together?
mhm,
In what instances do we want to get together and like really have a dedicated brainstorm or like workshop out of the paradigm of our usual day to day? Like, I'm with you. Obviously, I
mhm,
think it all just looks different. And I think that that's the case at the various like startup hubs and events
mhm,
in town. And admittedly, I just don't get out like I used to, unfortunately. It's kind of been like a, wonderful but perfect storm of COVID plus having little kids. It's like,
mhm.
all that combined, like I'm not as tuned in to some of that as I used to be. But
Sure.
I sense that, yeah, that stuff has come back, is coming back, but it looks different. And
Yeah.
whether it will ever be the same, I don't know. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
I think it's okay. I think it's like the new way of working. Obviously,
Hmm.
things always kinda even out, right?
Hmm.
And so, yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Atlanta's a big town with a lot of stuff going on and people are hungry and it's human nature. So yeah, I'm
Mhm,
right there with you. Like at a minimum, there's going to be a balance. People want to get out and about, especially in like entrepreneurial space, because so
right.
much of it is about getting that support and meeting people and kind of building a support network.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially
well,
with
very, yeah.
solar founders, right? Especially if you're
Hmm.
early, like, you're just starting out, it's lonely, right? And
Hmm.
again, similar to COVID, but, like, we as a human population are made for a community, and so why would that not be true for a solo founder who is looking for a community in some way, right? So I think
Hmm.
that is more true after COVID because we experienced such deep disconnection that now people are seeking it. And hopefully, whether it be Atlanta Ventures, Atlanta in general, are providing spaces to do that. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
people in the tech scene right now who are providing that, which is super inspiring.
Well, definitely. And kudos to you, because I feel like even in the early worst parts of COVID, you were very like immediately on the ball of like shifting things online and staying really on top of it. I mean, a lot of folks, me included to a degree, like fell a little bit idle in that time because it was easy to,
Sure.
but you all have kept it up for sure. So pivoting back to your role at Atlanta Ventures
Sure.
for a bit.
Sure.
So you all have a great track record. I think anyone familiar or like look at the portfolio on the site, it's super impressive. So I think you have a good sense of, the landscape, obviously. You've seen a lot of startups rise and fall over the years, of
Oh yeah.
course. So big questions like based on your insights from Atlanta Ventures and elsewhere,
Mhm.
like what do you think are the most important ingredients for success for a startup? Like is it the team? Is it perseverance? Is it picking the right market? And I know there's no simple answer, but like where does your gut go based on your experience?
Yeah, great. I think it's not just one thing. So you're right about that. I'll speak to maybe a little bit about what we look for and then hopefully
Hmm.
that would trickle down. But specifically if you're looking to build a startup, right? That's high growth, venture backed, right? If you want to make money, right? Make a successful company. Because there's a lot
Hmm.
of companies out there that are amazing and wonderful and thriving that are not necessarily venture backed, right? So
Hmm.
that's what I'll speak to in this particular thing is that, I mean, ultimately focus on a big market with a real like solving a tough problem. That usually means that whenever that product gets in there, it gets stuck, right? Because if it's tough to
Hmm.
solve and you solve it, that's really you just get in there and can't get out, hence continue to be a
Hmm.
customer. Solving real tough problems and then focus on getting paying customers. That's really early on what makes you successful is your mom probably loves your product. That's wonderful. Is she paying for it? Is she authentic, right? So finding customers
Right.
that are not inside your network really proves authentic demand. And then of course, the market, right? Is the market big? We do think, like land and expand, start niche and go, right?
Hmm.
But like even that niche market, how big is it? Is it worse? Are you going to be able to sell and make $1 billion company, right? Again, this is
Hmm.
for a venture backed startup, but those are the things that we've seen success in, right? Like we've seen that, like you focus on the customer, you solve a really tough problem, and you focus on a big market. That's some good ingredients for success.
For sure. That all makes sense. And you're definitely speaking my language because I think a lot of that, like, of course, you have to, validate that not only are folks like say they're interested, will they really pay?
Right.
How sticky is it? I mean, it's kind of the whole like vitamin versus an aspirin
Yep. Yeah.
thing. And there are great vitamins out there, but generally, like, I would feel a lot more confident in something that solves a very specific pain point. So
Exactly.
that's great. That's all great advice. So a lot is changing right now
Yes.
with inflation, market volatility. It's crazy. What do you think the next couple of years look like for venture-backed startups? What will be the biggest challenges for founders to overcome,
Sure.
in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about this, when we think through, when we look at the market, like last year was very different than this year. I think ultimately you can't control the market, right? You can't control specifically. Maybe there's things maybe that we can do as a universe, sure, but you can't really control it. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. And ultimately, we try to encourage people to, like, it's going to come back, it's going to average out, right? It tends to be trending up over the past 100, 200 years, right? And
Mhm.
so really there's things that you can control and there's things that you can't. So when I talk about this, I usually say, hey, focus on the things you can control, which is the big problem, the customers, the market, right? So if you're spending time, say, if you want to raise or you're out there working on that and you're not talking to customers, no, there's a time and a place, right? If you raise, it's going to help you scale, et cetera. But if you're not focused on the right things that you can control, then you're not continuing that snowball effect for your company. And so bottom line, your valuation might change, right? Last year to this year, it probably did. And you could have been super successful or not, right? And it could have dropped, right? That is something that we often can't control. So we tend to encourage them to focus on what you can control, which would be that customer, that market, and the problem.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's good advice for sure, is it can cause a lot of at least unproductive worry to be
Yeah.
stressed about these big forces that, clearly no one knows exactly what's happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's
Um,
anxiety inducing when you could just build a baller company or a baller product. And what if you didn't have to raise? Again, I'm not saying like we love investing, but if your
yeah,
customers pay for your product, great. Have
yeah,
do that. So,
right, right. So, yeah, that's all good input. So, I feel like for Atlanta Ventures, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is like a probably oversimplification, but I sense that you all are not necessarily for the studio, but otherwise like pretty focused on, you know, revenue, like getting real paying customers, et cetera, like
mhm,
some of the early stage business fundamentals, which of course I appreciate, as compared to, you know, really just investing in like an idea purely or like a visionary founder type. So like I could be wrong. I assume that the current dynamics don't like dramatically change you all's evaluation perspective when you consider investments. But I guess what I'm getting to in an unnecessarily long way is like with Atlanta Ventures, or even just more broadly, it's like, what do you think raising money at that stage looks like now compared to like a year ago, for
sure,
example?
sure. You may incur a little bit of just people thinking about valuations differently, and you may, again, depending on who you're raising from, right, and what your product is and how much revenue you have and how much you don't have, right? I think it's going to be different for different sectors, right? Like healthcare versus marketplace versus whatever, right? So the industry might
Hmm.
change and the VC perspective might change. What I do encourage, right? So in a roundabout way, right? Like how people are raising is I think sometimes people think, "Oh, I'm gonna go out and raise in with one call, with one send here's my deck, raise in me," right? So I think that one thing that I would encourage in this season specifically, right? But all seasons, it doesn't matter if you're in the old season, the new season, right? Valuations are high or low. What would really help is thinking about investing and raising as a marriage, not say a one night stand, right?
Hmm.
Because you're in it for the long haul. And so looping investors in early, no matter what, right? No matter if if valuations are high or low, because what happens is you build rapport and it's more about, perhaps you send an email and say, "Hey, I'm working on this problem. I'd like your insight on this," right? It's not like, maybe you're going to be raising in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but
Hmm.
no one's going to write you a check that day, right? It's just that's not it's a marriage, right? You got a court, you got a date. And so
Hmm.
now more than ever, right? Especially again, the market's going to go up and down, but I think it's about connecting and building rapport and relationships with the people that you want to be in a marriage with, right?
Hmm.
And so I encourage them, anyone who's looking to raise, to be thinking ahead of the time, like who is it that you want on your team? Who is it that's in that industry? So if someone doesn't invest in robotics, it's probably not a good fit, which is totally fine, right? So find the people in that industry, in your niche, in that specific space, and go early and make it a relationship, not just a, hey, I need money. Because again, from our perspective, right? Maybe others are super responsive and love that. We're about building community, right? We want to work with
Hmm.
good people who we want to work with. And so starting a relationship as opposed to very like transactional is
Yeah,
what I always encourage people to think about and get out ahead of time in their courting of investors.
for sure. And yeah, I'm sure that you all do a lot of kind of helping people understand the realities that, like, just like everything in startups that appears to be some kind of overnight success story is
Mhm.
like, when folks raise money, it's typically a very time intensive, long haul to
Yeah.
get there. It's like obviously not, oh, you had 3 meetings or 4 meetings and you picked who was your prince. It's like you got to really have a serious, dedicated effort, oftentimes for 6 months, a year, like you said. So yeah, I'm sure now even more so you need to kind of have that long game mentality. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And you said it, I mean, you said it perfectly. Like the overnight success is usually 10 years, right?
yeah,
Like when we start out of our studio, we want to know, are people committed for like 5 to 7 years? Because that's maybe, Richard, like you've been at Tyrannosaurus Tech for eight,
6 years,
six
six and a
years,
half years.
right?
Yeah,
And you weren't just, oh, cool, instant success, right? Like it takes
yeah,
a lot of work. And that's the reality of an
yeah,
overnight success.
for sure, for sure. And I definitely embrace the like, it's really about just consistency and like small wins every day
Hmm.
is really like what yields success in time. It's like accruing interest or something. It doesn't seem like much, but if it's compounding
Right. Yeah,
in
and
time.
hopefully you're building your tribe, your community around you to celebrate those wins. And when we have a Slack channel for our entrepreneurs, and the other day, one of the CEOs had said they had a great day, super great day, right? And that was
Hmm.
super high, but they've also been in super lows, right? And so it was this kind of reminder where, hey, I'm in a high, had a great day. Here's a reminder: there will be lows and highs. I'm here to tell
Hmm.
you, like I'm in it with you in the lows because it happens. And again, why I'm such a fan of community and why I'm such a fan of being supportive and helping, whether they're in our portfolio or not, right? Because I'm here to help anyone, all right?
Hmm.
If they're not investable by us, it doesn't mean they're not a fantastic company. And so that's something to remember when we're cultivating our community and the events we do, the blogs we share, the people we meet, etc.
For sure, for sure. And I definitely think, whether you're talking about Atlanta or the Southeast or whatever it is, it's obviously not a zero sum game. It's like the more there are successful exits in our area,
Mhm.
or just great companies built that carry on indefinitely, like it does help everyone
Exactly.
for sure.
Yes.
Very cool. So, a lot of the time I've spent with you over the last few years has been with Community Bucket.
Mhm.
You've obviously been super crucial within that organization. I think you're president of the board of directors
Correct.
currently.
Mhm.
It's a great group. Can you just speak a little bit more about what Community Bucket is? Because I've referenced it a few
Sure.
times. What you all do, what's the mission? I'd love to get that out there.
Yeah, sure. So Community Bucket cultivates genuine connection through volunteerism, right? So we serve together and then we hang out. We call it service made social. You do good and you have fun. So we're made for forward thinking 20s and 30s young professionals, shall we say. That's where we've found, specifically in Atlanta, a demographic that wants to connect and wants to give back. And then we also, that's one of our, you know, target customers for Startup Talk. And then, of
Hmm.
course, we focus on grassroots community organizations. So nonprofits all over the space. You could just be a community group as well who need volunteers. We bring them together and then we at the end wrap it up with a social event, whether it be a brewery, a pizza night, a picnic in the park, yoga, some kind of social that will bring it all together and
Hmm.
ultimately create lasting relationships and community that is, you know, cultivated and grown out of serving together.
For sure. Well, it's a great organization. I've really enjoyed it. And exactly like you're saying, it's like going to volunteer is always great,
Mhm.
great thing to do,
Mhm.
but you all make it very fun. And I think, everyone has their own motivations too. It's like I always found I met good people, not that it was, the end goal, but like good people to have in my network, people that were doing cool things. Like it was definitely made it an all around, like very compelling package.
Yeah.
So definitely encourage that. And, at the end, I'll make sure to give you an opportunity to say like where to follow or
Sure.
reach out or donate or whatever you want to do. But you also run pitch practice at
Mhm.
ATV, which I think is super cool. That's
Yes.
been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of folks out there are not familiar with it, but could really benefit. So, can you give a quick rundown
Sure.
on what that's about?
Yeah, so it's a free, open to the public meetup that meets at Atlanta Tech Village every Friday at 1 o'clock. Sometimes I tweet that we're not meeting, but in general, every Friday. And the vision is that anyone who needs to pitch anything, here's the thing, we're always pitching something. If you're in an elevator, if you're at a pitch presentation, if you're at a company sales kickoff event, you're pitching something. And we tend to think that we sound amazing. And usually we do, right? However, sometimes it's really good to have a sounding board or if you're launching a new product to a new customer segment, right? There's always something that
Hmm.
we can do to practice. And so this has been a space, it's been 8 years, 9 years since pitch practice has been in existence. And I've been running it for 2.5 now. And the vision is to provide a safe space for people to just practice. We usually focus on a 30-second because if you can say it in 30, you can say it in 20 minutes, 4 minutes. You can
Hmm.
say it in 20 minutes, but don't know if you can always get it back down. But if you want to practice anything, you can come. So that wasn't a 30-second pitch, I realize, but I wanted to get it all in. So
No, I
come
think that's
open
great.
free.
I love it. And yeah, I think that's a super valuable resource. And like learning to just get it concise and
Hmm.
easy to understand is huge.
Yeah.
So I think you've had like a really interesting, cool career trajectory with the stuff you're involved in. Obviously, like Atlanta Ventures, Community Bucket, elsewhere. If you think back and had to name like maybe a couple of wins that have been most meaningful to you, like what really stands out that you either are proud of or just got a lot of fulfillment out of, I'd love to hear.
Sure. Yeah. I think probably that I've met so many people. I know it's like I'm like this is such a win. Like I was able to meet the right people at the right time. I met Jesse, right? So he is one of the founders of Community Bucket as well. And so I just in passing met him, and instantly it was like, "Yes, we should." I'm doing this. We should do this together, and have since. And then, of course, like, I met David through a connection of a connection of a connection, right? It was all like,
Hmm.
I met this, and I've been at Atlanta Ventures in some form, right? Because I've been at a lot of different roles as I've been here, for
Hmm.
6.5 years now. And so just the people that I have met through, again, and those are 2 examples, but that's a big win for me because I felt,
Hmm.
in those 2 examples, it was highlighting my hedgehog, right? Where I was able to just come in
Hmm.
and do me, be autonomous in the things that I do, and that has afforded me so many more opportunities, so many more connections, and I'm just super thankful to be able to brush shoulders, connect with people in all of those spaces, and yeah, I'd say that's, like, a big win, I would say.
For sure. Yeah, I'm sure you've learned a ton. And I know that you get to collaborate directly with some really sharp, seasoned folks. So I think it's awesome. And I know that just from knowing you, it's like you build a network without any like agenda, right? Like, which I think is always important. And I've tried to kind of have that same attitude where you just meet people, have good intentions. You're not necessarily looking for anything in return, but in time, it comes to mean something. Just having that good network to support you and guide you. So I love it. So my last question for you, and this can be within the context of raising, doing something venture backed or not,
Mhm.
but just what advice would you give to someone in the early stages of pursuing a new digital product? So someone
Sure.
tech product focused, what would you tell them?
I probably sound like a broken record, but focus on the customer. And
Yep.
it's I think we think that we built such an amazing product. It's for us, or it's, again, our mom said it was amazing. I
Mhm.
do recommend people read The Mom Test if no one has. It's an excellent book, and it talks about not leading the witness and asking intentional questions. But I do think businesses that are focused on the customer, specifically in tech, because we can build tech all day. I'm sure you have an amazing team of developers could whip up an amazing product, but if no one's going to use it or pay for it, then it doesn't matter. So talk to them,
Mhm.
spend time with them pre even building. We have seen a lot of products, and maybe this is something you've encouraged or encountered as well, is someone wants, "Oh, build this for me, Richard." And you're like, "Who's going to use it? What's this? Is this for you and you only?" And so I
Yeah.
I digress. Customer always just talk with them. They'll give you
Yeah.
the product that you need.
Yeah. I love it. And I'm right there with you. And I think that, you're right. We do a surprising amount of like pulling people back
Mhm.
from the point where they think they're ready to build something. And it's either encouraging more customer discovery or, other means of just validating the concept. But then in a lot of instances, it's like, does this really need to be a web app at this stage? Like,
Right.
could this just be a landing page with a subscribe? Like there's so many creative ways and so many cheap or free tools at our disposal these days that yeah, like anything you can do to better understand the customer, understand the market
Mhm.
at a low cost, low effort, I mean, will save you a fortune of pain and headaches and
Yes.
money down the road.
Yeah, I think we've talked
So,
about that before, specifically because you're an amazing product builder. However, oftentimes, how do you balance building a product with something maybe you're like, "This doesn't need to be a product. How can we?"
yeah.
And I've always appreciated your vision and your leadership and guidance on that, because the hope, of course, is that they get to a place where you could build that baller,
Mhm.
not must-have product with your guidance kind of early on. That's something I've heard, and always do think that you guys do well.
For sure. And everyone wants to create something that succeeds. So,
Mhm.
same. We want to make sure whatever we're building, it's like, does this add up? What's the
Mhm.
real
Yeah.
potential here? Awesome. I love it. I've really enjoyed it. I think we're about out of time.
Sure.
Seems like we're at a good stopping point. So thank you so much, JC. Always love catching up with you. So before we sign off, where can listeners go to connect with you
Sure.
and learn more about Atlanta Ventures or Community Bucket? And what can they do to show support?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm always willing to connect online, LinkedIn, Jacey Cadet. You can follow me. You don't have to be friends. You can just connect. Of course, AtlantaVentures.com. got tools, blogs, resources, podcasts. We do have 2. And I appreciate the production here very well because I do know what it takes to make it happen. And then communitybucket.com, community like a pale bucket.com. And all our
Awesome.
socials are there, etc. You can follow us. We'll take it. Pitchpractice.co is another one. You can RSVP or just show up. Come on. We'd love to be in any of those communities.
I love it. Well, thanks again. It's been great having you on the Digital Footprint, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Jacey.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Digital Footprint. This show is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. If you like what you heard in this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For show notes and access to all episodes, please visit tyrannosaurustech.com/blog. Digital Footprint.